Did the tank lift up?
Oh yeah, lift up. Oh, about, I can only guess, a metre and a half. We went right, bang. And it was just a God almighty red flash from my eyes. And I thought, oh, that's it, I'm gone. I'm history now. But the Americans amazed me with, when we worked with 7CAF, they would have rations packed on the back, like cartons and cans of Coke and whatever. And then we were out on ops, and this big caravan came out one day. I couldn't believe it. And the next minute, it opened up the side, and it's a hot dog stand. They're all getting hot dogs. I can't believe these guys. But Ralphie's got the gun hanging out the side, hasn't he? And he forgot to turn it. And as I pulled the stick off, it took the whole row of shops out with the gun. And all we can hear is all these things crashing, and Sleepy said, we're in deep shit here, boys, we're in deep shit, keep going. The main concern, as I said, was the mines. They were the scariest thing for me, were the mines. And especially towards the end, the RPG-7s. That was, especially when you saw the other tanks coming back in with these holes in them, and guys being wounded like they were, and you knew the next time you go out, there's a fair chance they're going to hit you with one.
Thanks for giving us your time today. The archive wouldn't exist without your time, so thank you very much. I'd like to start off today by just asking a series of questions before we start the interview proper about yourself. First of all, where were you born?
I was born in Hindmarsh in South Australia.
And where did you, is that where you grew up?
No, I actually grew up in Croydon and Croydon Park. And then when I was 10 years old, we moved to the eastern suburbs, a place called Erindale.
And where were you, or what were you doing when you got your call up?
I was actually working for the ABC, doing sets, like behind the cameras, doing the 7 o'clock news and the 7:30 report, etc. And
once you got your call up, I understand that was 1967?
That's correct, yeah.
Where did you go to do your training?
Yes, that was in July 1967, and I went to Puckapunyal. All the National Service guys from WA, SA, Victoria, Tassil went to Puckapunyal.
And then you were went into B Squadron after that training?
After that training, yes. Then we were allocated to a troop and within B Squadron.
And is it correct that you were then on standby for Vietnam?
That's correct, yeah. C Squadron had already gone to Vietnam in early 68, I think it was February 68. So during that period, obviously having been trained and done Canungra, we were on standby as replacements if required.
So when did you actually go to Vietnam?
I went in early December 1968.
And where did you join C Squadron?
That's what happened when I got to Vietnam in December. C Squadron was still there, and they weren't due to come home until February 69. So from early December till February I was with C Squadron, and obviously went with B Squadron.
So after February 69, where did you join, or did B Squadron come to Nui Dat? Or?
That's correct, yep.
And were you then based in Nui Dat? Or?
Yes, based in Nui Dat.
And this tour of Vietnam that you did, was that approximately 12 months? Or?
No, because I was National Service, I was due to come out after my 2 years in July 69. So I came home to be discharged. So I had just over 6 months.
And you spent all of that time in the Phuoc Toi province?
Most of it in Phuoc Toi. Occasionally we went out of Phuoc Toi, but not very often. There was just remember one occasion. one occasion when we went to north of Saigon. I think we just went out of the province then.
Okay. So you were then home in July 69?
That's correct.
And so did you fly out from Sydney?
Yeah. I didn't go on a domestic aircraft. I flew on a C-130A. So we flew out of Richmond Air Base to Darwin. Actually had the night in Darwin, and then we were supposed to have gone to Butterworth in Malaysia, but they didn't. In the end, they changed their mind, and we went straight into Vung Tau and landed at Vung Tau.
And you arrived in
Vung Tau.
Vung Tau. What were your first impressions?
I wanted to crawl across the tarmac like a snake. I thought, the first thing you get out the plane, are they going to shoot me here? You felt like this is it. They're going to start shooting at me now, but that wasn't obviously the case because Vung Tau was quite secure actually. It's not afterwards till you realise that. But yeah, it was scary. It was, you're scared. You don't know what you're heading into.
And Vung Tau, was that
It's a seaport.
Oh, yeah.
In Phuoc Tuy province, yeah.
And did you, I'm just trying to ascertain whether it was a commercial airport or a military airport.
No, it was a military airport.
And what was it about Vung Tau that, when you initially stepped off the plane, you're expecting to be shot at? Where did this anticipation come from?
Well, you knew you were in Vietnam and there was a war on. So, they told us obviously that Vung Tau was secure and all that. But in a war country, nothing's secure. People were shot at in Vung Tau even during the duration. So, and you knew this. And but the more you got into the country, you were acclimatised to it. So I remember sort of further down the track when you were out in the bush and that, and you were sort of sitting there contemplating things, having a cigarette, and then it dawned on you, say, this is bloody war here. I could be shot at any time. Who knows that someone's not up there bloody pointing a gun at me? A sniper's not pointing a gun at me. So you'd have to snap out of that and not be complacent. But then by the same token, if you're on edge the whole time thinking you're going to be shot at, you would have been a nutcase in the end. And I dare say, maybe it were nutcases, I don't know. There were certain guys that probably were on edge the whole time.
I'm just wondering about that reaction of being told that being trained previously, as you said, that the VC were amongst the civilian population, and then suddenly now you're becoming a part of that population to a degree. That paranoia that must set in.
Oh yeah, you do get paranoid about it. But then you down the track you get you're acclimatised to it. So that was, going from Nui Dat, from Vung Tau to Nui Dat. It's only a short drive. Just 20 minutes, half hour or something. So once you're inside the wire again, although you're still apprehensive, you feel a bit safer. You're inside the wire of Nui Dat, where the whole Australian base is there. So you feel a little bit more, I wouldn't say relaxed, but you feel a bit more secure, I suppose.
And what was Nui Dat base like?
It was probably like a big, I suppose, a scout jamboree. There's all these tents everywhere, and the only thing was there's all the choppers flying over. Choppers everywhere. It's one thing that sort of was the instant impression, I suppose, of helicopters everywhere, choppers everywhere. And that's what it appeared to be. And dust, because it was dry. Dust everywhere. Yeah. And again, you're daunted because you haven't gone up with your mates. You're a replacement, so you don't know anybody there. There's no one evacuate only the guys that went before you that you knew about. But of course, they're not there. They'd gone out on operations because the tanks seemed to be constantly out on ops. So yeah, so you had a week. I had a week to acclimatise to it, and then I got sort of put in a troop.
What did you do in that week?
I did mess duties, I think. Yeah, I was in the mess, I think. Yeah.
And can you describe the layout of the camp?
Well, where we were is obviously the break. You can't get up, no. Where we were responsible for a certain portion of the perimeter of Nui Dat. So when you first go into Nui Dat, you see all these different, obviously, corps of the army in there. So then I went round to where Armoured was, and there's the outside wire, and then you've got the inside wire, and all the tanks were in between the outside and the inside wire. But initially I was inside the dual wire, camped in there while I was doing this early part of it. And then when I joined the troop, then you had to go through, and you were allocated a tent within a troop. So there was 4 of you in this tent, and your tank was virtually next to you there.
So when did you meet your crew?
After that week, yeah.
And how did...
and then again, I'm just trying to recall. I can't remember a lot about it. I was very lucky in the crew that I was in, is that we all got on well together. You know, there was never any animosity. I don't recall any animosity to one another. And again, I come back to this thing, we're all in the same boat. Fortunately, my crew commander then, Sleepy Tugenza, this was his second tour, so he was a very stabilising influence on us, you know, and you could turn to Sleepy, and he was a great guy, really nice guy. Only one problem, he was a Queenslander, but we never held that against him. So he was, and you know, he knew the ropes, and we became friends. It was, you know, I was very lucky, I suppose, to get into that troop with those guys, with that crew. Yeah.
So what troop were you with?
I can't honestly recall. I can't remember all the details. I know. I can't even remember the crew, the troop leader, because that was a C Squadron troop leader. I can't even recall who it was. I honestly can't. A lot of that's still pretty blurred as to, you know, I suppose I was in shock to an extent, I don't know. But I just remember those guys in the troop, in my crew.
So you are now part of C Squadron?
Yep.
We're unsure of the truth.
Troop, yeah. Sorry.
No, that's fine. When can you remember meeting the crew for the first time?
No, I can't. I can't really recall that. I can't really recall that.
And what had happened to the previous driver?
I don't know. I don't know. I can't recall that at all, to be completely honest with you. I can't recall that at all. I don't even know the involvement of, you know, maybe, I just remember the main crew that I was with in Mature, but I don't recall the absolute details of how one left, one came and whatever. Because there would have been times when that happened. But our crew, I was together for the main part of the time, except, you know, when I was injured once over there. And then I went to another crew, but I came back to my other crew again. So they must have had another driver, replacement driver. Maybe there were guys that were floating. They were floating around from crew to crew as replacements as required.
You mentioned that initially you went over to Vietnam as a replacement for C Squadron. How did C Squadron receive you as a replacement?
Yeah, there was no problems there. I didn't perceive any problems anyway. yeah, there was no animosity, if you put it that way. No, it was just everybody was there to do a job and get on with it. So yeah, and I felt myself that I fitted in AOK. And obviously this was an ongoing thing where national servicemen were going home to get discharged, and so there was a changeover period. So there were plenty of guys that had come before me that had been replacements, so no, there was no dramas.
Well, what was your first operation that you went out on?
I don't really remember much about the first operation. I just remember the first time going out through the wire. Oh, had the 9mm pistol there, thinking, do I get it out now? And seeing again black clad pyjamas with the hats on, thinking, are they them or whatever? And even when we pulled up in the bush, well, where's it going to happen? How's it going to come? Very, very obviously nervous. And that's about all I can really remember of that. I just remember being first time going out through the wire, being very, very scared. But after a while, obviously, I think we only went out for a day manoeuvre that first time because it was a acclimatisation. And it was in the dry, I remember it was in the dry. And coming back, the unbelievable thing was the dust when you come round, to come back round through the Dat to come back. And of course a 55-tonne tank chews up the soil quite a bit. And our teeth used to be black with soil from the dust coming up everywhere. We're breathing it all in. Yeah. And you had to stay well back from the tank in front of you because of the dust. It was different to Australia, let's put it that way. Different to the Pucker Range. Different climate, different terrain. Yeah. And of course the rice paddies, and again the being so surprised that this was a backward country. So backward it was, you know, it was. I knew that it was a backward country and it was third world, but it was just when you got there and saw it and saw how these people lived, it was just, yeah, anyhow.
And was it in C Squadron that you got your Colonel Clink tank and you stayed with that tank, or did you?
Yeah, I really, again, I can't remember because we changed, we may have changed around a lot. I really can't remember. I just remember this thing sticking in my mind, Colonel Clink. It may have been something that just clicked in my head that Colonel Clink, I don't know, because they had various names. And I can't remember any other name, so that just sort of sticks with me, Colonel Clink. And of course I used to watch Hogan's Hero, so it stuck. It's probably where the booze we went to, because that was called the Enamoka pub. Had it blazed across the roof of it, of the corrugated iron. And that just sticks in your mind. Because a lot, as I said to you before, a lot of things I've forgotten about 30 odd years ago. Yeah, maybe in the dark places back there, but I can't recall it.
Well, Sleepy obviously is a nickname. Colonel Clink is a nickname.
Yeah.
Did you have a nickname?
Mine was just Jamo. Everybody called me Jamo. And same with Tony Ralphie. It just stuck. Yeah. I don't know where. I suppose Sleepy's came because he already had that when I got there. It's because probably, I don't know if he had a lazy eye or his eyes made him look like he was half asleep, I suppose. But he was far from that. He was quite an astute character. And he was a professional soldier, simple as that. Yeah.
And we'll just let's talk about the weaponry that you would take on your personal, on your body yourself when you went out on operations. What were you personally armed with?
I had a 9mm pistol, mainly because when we first went into national service, the main arm was obviously SLR, the self-loading rifle, and and when we got to Vietnam, a lot of guys had the American Armalite. But obviously being a tank driver, you couldn't, in this confined space, put a rifle. So all the drivers had pistols, 9mm pistols, as a personal armament, yeah. But in a real firefight, it wouldn't have been much use, really. It was just, if it was close combat, you had some sort of defence.
And where would you keep it when you were out on
I
ops?
had a holster with a sling on it. So it was always just right there. I remember the first time out through the wire, it was out sort of, do I put it here or am I ready or, but no, it was back in there again pretty soon. Yeah. But as far as personal armament, the other guys had, I know two, I think the operator had an Armalite, and I think Sleepy might have had one too. I can't remember yet. Yep.
Well, I'm not sure what sort of tanks you were using when you were in your training, but now you're using the Centurion tanks.
The Australian Army only ever had the Centurion when I was there. The ones that were taken to Vietnam were upgraded to, I think I'm right enough to say this, Mark 5s. What they had on them was infrared. They had an extra fuel tank put on the back. I think from memory that was a 100-gallon fuel tank that used to sit on the back of the transmission. Yeah. There were probably some other subtleties, but I don't recall them all. Maybe on the coaxially mounted, I don't know if the original tanks just had both a 50 calibre and a 30 calibre machine gun.
And most of the time you were driving, were there any other times that you swapped position, or was it all driving?
Yeah, I spent all driving there. And yeah, I don't recall ever being in the gunnery seat or the loader seat at all when I was in Vietnam. Yep.
Well, perhaps you could just take us on what a typical operation was, you know, from getting the briefing to going out.
Yeah, well, a lot of the times when I was there, we worked out of fire support bases. So they'd have an operation and then secure an area, and then have it barbed wire. So we had a perimeter fence for the fire support base, and then they'd have their come in and they'd dig a hollow for the tanks to go into with the bung, obviously, or the spoil that they've taken out of the hollow up the front, so that the tank could just drop in there and then just have the gun pointing over the front. So we'd spend obviously a bit of time in those, but then we would work out on operations with the infantry. Now, when we first were there, the infantry weren't real keen on tanks, to be honest. They thought, well, what use are they, this great lumbering thing? Because when you're moving around the tank, which has got this thumping big V12 Rolls-Royce motor in it, it makes a lot of noise, and you can hear a tank coming from miles away. And I dare say the infantry didn't like that, because VC would be disappearing quick smart. So a lot of the times, you know, we didn't, in the early part, we didn't get a lot of contacts because of this. They were obviously scared of them and didn't have firepower to come up against them. So a lot of the times was the only way I could stop them was obviously mines. And I remember just one instance where we went down one of the fire support trails, fire trails I think they used to call it. The Americans used to come through and use the defoliants and kill off that portion of the jungle. Then they'd come through with bulldozers, then on bowl all the shrubbery over, and there used to be a track going down the middle of it. Well, this particular day we're going down, but we didn't go on the track. We were going along the side of the fire trail, but you know, it's obstacles everywhere and it was pretty difficult. So the infantry commander who was commanding this operation said, oh look, we're going too slow here, we better get back on the track or we'll never get anywhere. So we turned back on the track, and then they got the engineers and cleared the road in front of us for mines. So we went all the way, and we must have gone about, I don't know, 10 mile down the track. Then we cut in and we were doing some scrub bashing, looking for hideouts. and scrub hashing was unbelievable because this jungle was just virtually impenetrable, and a lot of the times I used to have to drop the seat down and be rely on Sleepy to tell me where to go, because there's trees and foliage and the stench of the greenery. It was just overpowering. It was just so strong, and you'd have ants' nests falling down on you, and I used to keep a spray can of stuff, and you'd be spraying yourself because these ants would get on you and they'd bite hell out of your neck and it. So anyhow, we'd done all this and we worked with the infantry and we hadn't found anything, so we're coming back out of it. We wanted to get out there before nightfall. So I was in the lead tank. Well, we were, I should say, and we're going back along the track to get out of there. So we're coming to where where we turned onto the track, and I went to turn off, and Sleepy said, no, you've got to go stay on the dirt road. They want to get out of here. I said, yeah, but they haven't cleared this. No, they said it'll be okay. So we roared down there. We went a couple of miles, and boom, whammo, we went up on a mine. And I thought, well, that's it. And I just pinched myself. I still remember myself pinching myself to see if I was still alive, because I just got this red flash. Anyway, we're still there, and we'd lost, had blown the track off, the road wheels and a suspension unit. I think the suspension unit weighs 1.5 tons. That was all gone. Told not to get off the tank, because what they do is if they put a main mine there, they put anti-personnel mines around there, so if someone comes off. So I had to stay on the tank, and then they fire canister rounds into the scrub in case that, because the Vietnamese or VC would sit there and click the 2 wires to get it, or it might have been a trip. We don't know. But anyhow, infantry spread out. We spent the night there. The Ramie came out and they replaced that suspension unit out in the field. Road wheels, track. Next morning we're gone again. But it was quite a daunting experience, because prior to that, my roommate from Australia, a guy called Mick Hannaford, used to call him Moving Pictures actually, because he had tattoos all up his arm, but a hell of a nice guy. I was in country only for about 3 weeks or so, and Mick went up on a mine, and he was killed. So I never saw him over there, but it was obviously, when you hear these things in your yeah. So I thought the same thing had happened to me, obviously, when I went up in that mine.
And did the tank roll over? Or?
No, it was a hole in the ground about, I'm guessing now, about 1 metre, I suppose. Bloody big hole.
Did the tank lift up?
Oh yeah, lift up. Oh, about, I can only guess, 1 metre, 1.5 metres. We went right, bang! And it was just a god almighty red flash in front of my eyes, and I thought, oh, that's it, I'm gone. I'm history now.
And could you see immediately, or?
Oh, it was dust and shit everywhere. And of course the thing, Sleepy, you right, Jamo? You right, Jamo? Pinch myself, yeah, I'm still here, okay.
What about the loader and?
Oh yeah, they were, you right, Jamo? Because we were all pretty close. And I'm saying back then, you guys okay? You guys okay?
That would have been an absolutely horrendous experience to drive over a mine. But then even harder to stay put and not be able to get out of the tank. Yeah,
well, there's 2 schools of thought there, isn't there? You want to abandon it if you think it's really badly damaged, because you don't know what they're going to do. If they've planted that and then there's going to be an attack. But you're better off the same old thing, sticking with the tank.
What was your first impulse?
No, I wouldn't stay put. I'm good, because you're trained to do that. You're trained to do that, to stay put. And of course Sleepy's screaming at me, don't get out, because of the anti-personnel mine. So obviously you won't get out. Well, I didn't want to get out anyway. Yeah.
And did you know, or were you able to find out what sort of mine it was? Well, what did you do then? What you said you had to stay.
Well, engineers come and clear around the tank. Once the infantry secure the whole area, and then we feel there's no VC or NVA there, then engineers come in and clear the whole area, and then of course then you pull the tank out of there. We just pulled it out with another tank, and then so we can get it on some solid ground so they can do the repair work. And those Ramey guys, they're just incredible what they did. I remember one night we did a full engine, we blew a motor, and they did a full engine replacement overnight, and just not to show any light, had a canvas cover or tarp over the whole top of the tank and changed the complete engine during the night. And it's as hot as hell in there. You can imagine how hot it gets in there. It gets hot. And these guys, unbelievable. And you're mobile again. What they did in the field's incredible.
Well, just going back to when your tank ran over the mine, because it blew up from underneath, you said there was a hole.
In the ground, yeah.
So does that mean the tank was sort of stuck in the hole?
Well, it had fallen into that section there, obviously, because the road wheels are gone, and then it falls down on that side, so we just needed to pull it back and get it out of there so Ramey can actually get underneath and jack it and then mount the new suspension unit and everything on it. Yeah.
And where did you sleep that night?
In the tank. Right. I always used to sleep in the tank anyway. Yeah.
Why was that?
When we were in fire support bases and that, I always slept in the tank, and the other guys slept in their seats or slept on the back, just so you're ready to go. And I was always amazed that, I could have a 10-minute kip and then be revitalised when I came home here. Because even when I was sleeping there, they'd wake me up in the middle of the night, because on the tank you've also, because you've got infrared on it, had a little Morris minor four-cylinder motor there that they'd start up to recharge the batteries on the tank, so they could traverse the gun with the turret. Where I laid my seat back, I'd be inside the turret. So they'd just say, "Jamo, just lift your seat up. You're right. Shh, traverse the gun. Right, we finished. Go back to sleep. Bang," and then go back to sleep again. Because if I didn't sit my seat up, they would have cut me in half. So yeah, but you get used to that. Obviously you're trained for sleeping like that. And even I remember just about sleeping, when this fire support base one night with these Yanks, and they had these big mobile guns, big 10-inch guns, and they are firing all night. And the guy said next to me, "God, those bloody guns, weren't they loud?" I said, "Yeah, I didn't hear them much. So I must have been just zonked." So you just condition your sleep, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, it's a way out and
Yeah.
a way of switching off and
Yeah.
escaping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, how did you, the noise of going over a mine, you said there was an explosion. And you saw a flash of red light. What about the noise?
We had headphones on, but the noise was deafening, obviously, when it went off. Pardon me. It's the same when you fire the main armament. When that gun goes off, and especially when you're firing AP rounds, piercing, because we'd fire those into bunkers. If you could see, there were, because the North Vietnamese had, bunker systems and tunnel systems everywhere. And we used to fire AP rounds in there to break them up. The front of the tank jumped up about a metre, because that's a solid projectile when it goes, and the fire power behind it to take something out is quite horrendous. Yeah. So yeah, but we were used to firing that thing when we were in Australia, so you get used to that sound. It's probably why my hearing's not all that flash these days. So yeah, I suppose the explosion was, when it happened, was quite horrific, but it was, there was always plenty of noise and that going on all the time. When I probably didn't take that much notice of it really. I suppose those headphones protected a bit. I think maybe at that stage I had one of those American helmets, because the Americans had these, they weren't a steel helmet, they were like a fiberglass helmet, but they went around your head and they had the mouthpiece on it. And we'd actually, because they used to dice a lot of their stuff, and we used to go and rummage through their rubbish dump and get these things and use those. Yeah.
And you wore yours when you were driving?
Yeah, I had one for a while, and then I tossed it. I didn't use it after a while. And the crazy thing about it, we used to wear our berets, our black berets, with our Armoured Corps badge in it. And I've still got mine, the one I wore in Vietnam. And you think, how stupid was that? Here's a silver badge right there as an aiming point right through your head. But probably didn't think at the time, I don't know. It's just, when I look back in it retrospect, I think, what a stupid thing to do. Why would you have a big silver badge there as a marking point? Anyhow.
You would wear that out on ops?
Yeah. Most of the guys did. Wore there, because Armoured Corps don't have a slouch hat. They just have a black beret. Yeah, and all the guys wore them in Vietnam.
Well, you had to spend the night while your tank was being repaired. How long do you think did it take to, I guess, come back down to earth and get over the shock of running over a mine?
Again, I'll come back to this thing again that I don't remember really dwelling on it all that much. I remember it made the papers here in Adelaide because there was a photograph in the paper of one of the American generals, General Abrahams, I don't know if I've got that right, was there, in the photos. He was in an Australian tank, and my mum obviously was cutting out all these things out of the paper. Said, "Oh, that's our tank there." It's the mine I went up on. So yeah, and of course other guys were going up mines. This mine, I think, was aimed for an APC, because we're on the tank, the driver's on the right hand side, not on an APC, it's on the left hand side. And if an APC had hit that mine, he might have been history. Might have been, I don't know.
And what do you think was the Centurion tank's weak spot, if any?
It was slow and not cumbersome, but it made a lot of noise. So to an extent it scared a lot of the BC off, that maybe that the infantry wanted to get into. The other thing was in the wet. You couldn't move much in the wet. We got one in a rice paddy one day and couldn't get it out. It was down to its belly. So in the end they brought the engineers in and they broke the track off, and then they put explosives underneath and blew it up out of the mud so we could pull it out. Couldn't have suction and obviously caught it in there. Because I always remember when we're doing that, and of course every time something happened to a tank, all the drivers would get out and obviously be helping. And I remember we're slogging around in this rice paddy, and the stench is unbelievable because they use human excreta to fertilise and all that. He was saying, I was one of them, when I get out of here I'm going to get myself a nice cushy job. And 6 months later I always remember in the Bar Smith Library in the Adelaide University's laying a drain up to my knees in mud saying, "You idiot." So, yeah. So it wasn't much fun in the wet when, you got stuck in that.
But still, it might not have been completely indestructible, but still it could withstand a mine.
Yeah. But I suppose in the case of Mick, when he was killed on a mine, what they used to do is in the bottom of the tank, especially where the drive was, there was a plug. And underneath it, it had a lip on it, and it screwed into another lip. What they used to do is they used to take the plugs out and have them on the inside, so that when it rained and sweep the dirt out and all that, just take the plug out and the water would run out and they'd screw them back in. But what invariably happened was that they, because of the humidity and the moisture content, they'd corrode, so you wouldn't get them the full way in. They'd only be in by a couple of threads. or what happened when Mick went up. The plug came out, took his arm off, and of course then the blast came through the hole. So I just remember we were out and it came over the radio. Everybody get out and take their plugs out and put them in the right way. Because that's what had happened. So, but then there was another guy. He was a regular army guy. And that was later in my time there. A guy, I think it was Michael Kerr, sticks in my mind. He went up and mine was killed. I wasn't there when it happened. I just remember Tom telling me that, he was bits and pieces everywhere, and he said they looked up in the tree and there was his beret with half his head in it. So they made mines that could get underneath the tank because he would have had his plug in at that stage. So you're always conscious that there's always going to be a bigger mine.
And was it the mines that, as a tank driver, you feared most?
Oh yeah, of course, in those early days. Because as I said, we used to get a few contacts that were very spasmodic. But then in the end of my time there, that's when they had the RPG-7s, the Russian-made things, which were a heat round. And they got, they hit the side of the tank and then they would burn a hole through the turret. And then you'd have this projectile coming inside with hot molten metal spinning around inside the turret. Fortunately, in my tank, we never got hit by any. But obviously other guys in our troop, Jeff, I can't think of his surname, he was a corporal. They caught one through the side of the tank that went under and it got him in the fleshy part of the underside of the thigh. So how lucky is he? Pete Chapman, he was a loader operator, not on my tank, hit the front of the tank and obviously got molten shrapnel on his face. Sullivan, the crew commander, remember him, who the troop leader, he saw one fired at him and he was there and just leant forward and the fins on the back, it went past and just ripped his shirt open. Kept going. How lucky is he? But yeah, a lot of them got hit in the end. But I was going home then. I'm so glad I was going home then.
Well, tell us a bit more about the tank and generally where the tanks would be positioned in relation to the infantry and how you would move out in formation.
Yeah, well, we'd be going slow with them as we go scrub bashing and that. And I just remember, because we were so lucky in the tank. For instance, we used to carry all our water on the back platform of where the heat was from the motor and everything. So you wouldn't want to drink this stuff because they had obviously chlorine in it, and hot water condensed in chlorine wasn't very pleasant to drink. But what we could do at night, because we had so much water, is we used to have a shower that we'd put on the barrel of the gun. It was canvas with a thing on it. We'd fill it up with this hot water and have a shower. We had the big ready bins on the side of the tank, and we'd have clean greens in there so we could have a shower and clean up and put clean greens on. And these infantry guys, obviously, they're still in their stinking greens, and some of those guys are in there for weeks and weeks on end. So you felt pretty sorry for them. So we used to brew up. We could brew up in the tank. We had a little kettle and that you could make a brew up. So constantly we'd be brewing up for these guys and hand it out to them as they walk along so they could have a brew and that. And that's about all you could really do for them. But yeah, and probably to an extent, I dare say the national service guys in infantry were so grateful when you had a tank sitting alongside you, scaring VC away. So yeah, but then we used to go scrub bashing as well with them, trying to find hideouts and that. And a lot of those were futile. But then we did find some, but most of the time, because when you come to the tank, they've gone, long gone.
And on average, how long would you be out for?
Oh, we'd be out for weeks and weeks at a time. Yeah. I didn't spend a lot of time in Nui Dat really. Most of my time was all out on ops, at fire support bases or whatever. The only time I came back to Nui Dat was on the front of the tank you have a guide roller that adjusts the track, and they're a cast iron roller. And when you used to go over the rice paddies all the time, because they've got the bungs in, the paddy, and you go bang, bang, they used to crack around the top. So I was in a fire support base, so we'd taken the track off and replaced this guide roller, taken off. And I got a new one from obviously the store that they had at the fire support base, and I'm wheeling it back there, and of course it hit a stone and fell on my foot and crushed 2 toes. I got a second toes quite flat actually. So I didn't sort of think, oh bloody hell, I've got a toe. So we finished off putting the guide roller back on my toes, thumping away there. And we got it all back on. They said, oh, you better take your boot off now, look at that foot. So I took it off, and of course there's blood everywhere. And they said, right, you'll medevac back to Nui Dat. So they put a chopper, and I went back, and I remember going into the hospital there, and he said, well, that toenail's got to come off, and just pulled it off. I can still feel it coming off. Anyhow, so then I was on light duties there for a couple of weeks back at the DAT, and then they said, righto, you've done an aircraft loaders course, you're on refuelling tanks, you're the next one on the stint. So I did it for 3 weeks, I think, flying in the choppers every day, and what we used to do is sling 2 44-gallon drums of fuel in a net underneath it. So I'd get the drums ready and roll them into the net, they'd bring the chopper in, hook it underneath, drop the chopper down, I'd drop in the chopper, and off we'd go. We'd fly at treetop level through the rubber plantations, wherever. They'd drop me back out where the tanks were. I'd jump out, unhook them, they'd fly off, and then we'd just refuel all the tanks there when it was empty, call the chopper back, hook it back on, and off again.
And how far into your 6-month tour did that happen? Was that sort of
probably halfway?
Halfway?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. So I did that for 3 weeks, and that's when one of the troop leaders, Sullivan's it was, can't remember his first name, Lieutenant Sullivan, his driver got hit in a contact, so he got medevaced off, and they flew me in, and I jumped into his tank, and that was where they just pulled back from the contact, and then the jets were coming in dropping the napalm, because NVA there entrenched in a tunnel system.
Okay, well, there's a lot of things there we'd like to explore, I think. So maybe we'll just make a note of that napalm dropping. But I'd just like to rewind a little bit and go back to... well, first of all, let's just go through again when you're on light duties after you'd smashed your toes. Mm-hmm. It doesn't sound like very light duties to me to be jumping into a chopper.
Oh, no, I had a couple of weeks in Nui Dat first before I did that. And my toe was getting better. Obviously, it'd been better by that stage because I could get my boot back on and that.
Peter, I was just wondering if we can go back a moment and if you could define for me what scrub bashing is.
Oh, well, it's just, as I said, the jungle when you get out of those the Firestone trails is virtually impenetrable. It's thick and green, so we would go. They maybe got certain information that there was NVA in the area, and so they would be looking for a base camp, and they'd maybe certain intelligence. I can only summarise because I was kept out of the loop, so I didn't really know, but they'd summarise that maybe there was a tunnel system there, that because that's how they used to survive in there. They'd have tunnel systems and they'd operate from there, and of course then they get resupplied up there. So we'd be going looking for those tunnels, and of course you'd find camps and they'd be looking for smoke or whatever. So we'd just go ploughing through this jungle looking for them, and I call that scrub bashing. And only a tank could get through those things. Like an APC was too light, so and that's what the tanks were used for, because they were heavy, and yeah, and I dare say if you went in there with a bulldozer or something, you haven't got the firepower protection as you have with a tank if you'd encountered something.
Thank you. Just can I ask a few things about Colonel Clink?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I do understand that the tank is an added member to your crew. Mm-hmm. And just How much space was there inside the tank for the four of you?
Well, where the driver was only, I'm only guessing now, probably a metre by, or maybe less than a metre. But then there was a space inside the turret that, as I said before, you know, I could sleep in and lay out through there, which was virtually underneath the gunner's feet, so to speak. But as I said, the turret moves around like that, so there's only that portion when it's in that position. Then inside the tank, it's fairly confined because you could only, where the gunner and crew commander sit, because they go through the one cupola lid, that's fairly tight in there, and as I said, that's probably why I never wanted to be a gunner. The loader's side has got a bit to manoeuvre. You could get a couple of people in there, but he needed the room obviously to move up so he could get ammunition out of the bins and whatever.
Well, that's my next question: is where ammunition and
all under the floor. So he would have, I'm just going on memory now, he had 2 bins that would slide around on rollers inside the turret there, where he could put 2 lots of shells there. Right, so he'd pull a certain number of shells out and have them ready there, and on the side of the tank was a hole where he could discharge the spent shells. So he would then, you know, as he's fired, he's loaded another shell in there, and while that's being fired, he's under the floor getting a replacement shell, and then when that goes, so yeah, it's all under the floor.
And petrol, would you carry spare petrol with you?
No, we had, the original Centurions had, I'm only guessing here, I think it was 120 gallons of fuel, and then when they upgraded them to Mark V, they put another 100-gallon tank on the back, which was an armour-plated, you know, rectangular tank on the back, just bolt on the back. And I was amazed that we never ever got hit in one. If you got I suppose they did in the end, past my time, but an RPG going through the back of the petrol tank on the back would have been quite catastrophic, I would say. But I never saw that, so can't comment. And
when you'd be out on patrol, you'd be out for quite a while. Where would you pack? Where would the rations be stored in the tank?
Oh, we had them in ready bins on the side of the tank. So, yeah, we had ready bins, as we called them, on the side where we'd have all our clothing and stuff, and then we'd have our rations in the side, hard rations. But then when we went back in the fire support bases, they had a mess there that they'd cook for you. And some of the times they used to bring out hot rations by chopper. They'd bring them in like a hot container, heat container, like an esky, I suppose, reversed, except to take heat. Yeah, and we used to get the American ration packs, which were just remember big cardboard boxes, and they'd be full of rations and cartons of cigarettes and things like what do you call them? Smarties, M&Ms, I think they called them. We used to get all that sort of stuff. So they're quite good. But the Americans amazed me with when we worked with 7CAF, they would have rations packed on the back like cartons and cans of Coke and whatever. And then we were out on ops, and this big caravan came out one day. I couldn't believe it. And the next minute it opened up the side and it's a hot dog stand. They're all getting hot dogs. I can't believe these guys.
Well, before we talk more about the Americans and being out there with the Americans, can I just ask, was there any daily routine that you had to go through with the tank?
Oh yeah, like every day you were constantly checking oils, out with the grease gun, greasing the road wheels, greasing suspension units, and that was instilled into us obviously right from the days at core training at Armoured Centre. If that tank's not serviced and maintained, you're not going anywhere. And well, to an extent, I think even, I don't ever remember anybody happening to them, but I mean, if you hadn't serviced your tank and it had broken down where it really was happening, you could be on a charge if you hadn't maintained your vehicle. But, you know, you were crazy if you didn't do it. So yeah, maintenance was a big thing on a vehicle like that. Yeah, so every day, every morning, we would be, and the crew used to help, you know, because I couldn't do it all as the driver, although it was my responsibility, everybody used to help. And then we'd clean the gun as well, scrub the gun.
So how long would it take in every day? Just
I'm forgetting now. You'd spend at least an hour, I'd say. You know, and there were times when you couldn't do it every day because you were on ops and you were required to do something. But you know, when you'd have a break somewhere at some time that you'd say, right, you know, we're not only go and grease the road wheels. Yeah. But the main thing was checking those oils all the time. So you have to lift the engine covers and make sure that the transmission was right and the engine was right.
And where would you access the oil from?
Oh, out at the ready bins on the side again. Get the grease gun up there as well.
Carrying quite a bit inside this very small area.
No, that's on the outside of the
Right.
tank. They're in the ready bins on the outside of the turret.
Right. Okay. And how could you access the engine?
You had to lift the engine covers on the outside. You've got the front of the tank where the turret is and the gun, and then at the back you've got a flat section which is engine covers, transmission covers. So you need to lift those, and they're all armour plated, and they not in a concertina, but that one would interlock into the other, so you have to lift it in a sequence. Because like one would have an angle like that, the next one would have the angle like that, and lock into it. Yep, makes sense.
And just to, now, you made a comment before about the Americans and their rations, but what were they like out in the field?
Like the Americans? Well, I didn't, in the troop we didn't work a lot with the Americans. We only worked with 7th Cav, who were APCs, and where we used to work 4 tanks to a troop, and even in the end we were down to 3 tanks in a troop. They used to work 20 APCs to a troop. So they were a sheer 5-power unit, and they used to have miniguns mounted on the front of theirs, you know, with the 7-barrel, like the old Gatling gun. And the 5-power they used to put out is unbelievable. So they'd just line up and shoot out of everything.
That's 20 tanks.
No, they're not tanks, they're
Sorry.
APCs, armoured personnel carriers. Of course, the Australians had APCs there, and they were what they call the cavalry units, cav units. But they used to work 4, but these Americans, unbelievable, 5-power they had.
So
We saw those Gatling, or the miniguns let fly. Well, it was frightening.
So what was the op that you were out with them?
I can't remember the details of it, to be honest. I just remember we worked with them once in one operation. We went on this, I remember we went on an op, and it was north of Saigon, right on the top end of Tui province, and we were away for a month or so, I think. And we'd been driving every day, and the tanks were taking a bit of a battering, you know, mechanically wise. So when we were up there, they decided when we'd finished the ops, instead of driving them all the way back to the DAC, we'd come down on the river barges through the Mekong Delta. So we loaded on these American river barges and came all the way back down by river. Yeah. So that was a bit scary too, because you can get shut out of the water.
I was going to ask you, what was it like going down the Mekong?
Yeah, a lot of traffic during the day, but not much at night. Well, supposed to be none at night. Yeah. But it was, again, that was an experience because it was different to what we'd done before. Not having to drive, but it was scary because you thought they could, and after each 7, especially, as I said, those later times, they could have, you're very vulnerable. Well, I thought we were, anyway. Anyhow, nothing happened.
You were just, when you were describing the Americans' artillery, that it was quite...
Oh, the 5-power.
Yeah, the 5-power. They have a reputation of being quite gung-ho and trigger-happy. Did you see much of that?
Yeah, I was about to say the Americans were known as being gung-ho. I suppose it's the thing, the thought process is that they think they're biggest and the best and they got the most firepower, And I think that was the strategy that they thought they could win the war in Vietnam purely by the amount of firepower that they had. And they would just blaze away at anything. Even to, you know, when they, with the bombs they were dropping the B-52s. Because we went into a bomb crater one day. I couldn't believe how big it was. We crashed into the jungle next minute, woof, the whole tank was down in this hole, the B-52 crater. But all overgrown with scrub and everything. But yeah, scary. It scared the shit out of me when it happened. We got out of it okay though. Yeah, so, yeah. And it was known, widely known by the Australians that the infantry, and I don't know all their tactics, of course, but they wouldn't use any of the trails, whereas the Americans would use trails through the bush. And you know, they were booby-trapped, and yeah, you're going to be vulnerable when you do that sort of stuff. So Americans seem to want to take chances, you know, because they think they've got the firepower to get out of it. Whereas the Australians were a bit more reserved, and I always thought we were smarter how we operated than what they were. Didn't take the chances they did.
Well, I mean, and this is something that's come up quite a bit with Iraq, but the Americans are also known to have quite a few problems with friendly fire. Did you see any of that?
No, we never encountered any of that. No. We weren't working with them that much, only that instance with the 7th Cavalry Unit. Because, you know, most of the ops we were in was the artillery, it was the Australian artillery that we were working with. The only time that I was involved was that time when I'd got called back after I'd been in Nui Dat after I'd done the tow, was that time they came in with the napalm. And thank God they were on target with that day, because when you see napalm go, it is awesome. Again, it's how anybody can survive through something like that. Anyhow, they did. They're still there.
So, so how did you were on? You were tank refuelling.
No. I was on tank refuelling, and then I was called back to Nui Dat, and they said, "Grab your gear." I was on a chopper, and I was dropped out in the scrub there because they'd medevaced the troop leader's driver off, and I was straight into his tank. Okay, and just at that stage, as we're pulling back from that op, that's when the jets are coming in dropping the napalm.
And what warning was there that there was going to be a napalm dropping?
I don't recall any. All I just know is remember the jets coming screaming through and letting it go. We were quite a ways back when it happened, obviously, that we'd pulled back. And they'd obviously called them in, because they were fairly well entrenched in there. And we pulled back for that night. Yeah.
And how did they drop the napalm from the jet?
Virtually at treetop level, it felt like. In fact, they had so much firepower, they'd have come to there, dropped it and gone before the fireball. But they were still in there. But obviously they were in a trench system, in a tunnel system, to have survived that, because obviously it sucks up all the oxygen out of the air when you drop something through there like that. But it was just absolutely devastating to see it. Anyhow.
Well, I was going to ask what the aftermath was like.
Well, it was all burnt and everything, but we were back from there, and that was at night. And that night, obviously, we're set up for the night, and everybody was at the ready because we had infantry with us as well. And then that night, I don't know, forget it. There was a blood-curdling scream, and then machine gun fire, and then we're at the ready, and of course the troop leaders are, get ready, they're going to mass attack, so just get prepared, and everybody's at the ready. And of course, you know, you're shooting yourself because you can't see in front of you, it's pitch black. But anyhow, what it was, one of the infantry guys had had fallen asleep and had a nightmare and pulled the trigger on the machine gun. So it was a false alarm. But still scary. Anyhow.
So, what position do you take in that situation where you're actually becoming prepared for an
Because
attack?
I'm sitting in the tank ready for start-up. And I've got my 9mm pistol there, not that that's going to do in case someone's right above me here. But we're ready for start-up, and if something happens, boom, we're on the tank and we're going. And I'm just guided by what he's telling me up the top.
And were you, any of your operations part of ambushes?
Only once when we went down to the Mekong, we had one night, nothing happened. I just remember that we went down by the river there one night.
And this may sound like a very naive kind of question, but with ambushes, you're supposed to be quite stealth about the way you approach. How do you discreetly take a tank through the jungle?
You don't really. You'd have to be set up, quite some time during the day. But on the river, of course, when you're set up on the river for an ambush, you're waiting for a boat to come that's come 20 miles. He doesn't know that you've moved in there 20 miles away. Hopefully he doesn't anyway. But that was the idea of it. So, yeah. Fortunately, we weren't involved in a lot of ambushes because of that very reason, that you can't virtually put a tank in there.
And when you're out on these ops, you're out for quite a while, like a good chunk of time per time. How, when you actually do get time to stop, how do you relax? How do you unwind from?
We used to play cards. Our crew used to play cards virtually every spare minute we got. We'd even play on the cupola lid in the moonlight. And I just remember, I hope Elaine's not going to get a copy of this. I thought, when I get home, if I can get a job and I can earn $50 a week, I'd be laughing. Well, I remember losing $400 one night at cards. Thankfully, I won it back.
So what card games were you playing?
Canasta, euchre, poker, anything. Poker mainly though. And it mainly used to be just in our crew. Because then, if you lost it one night, you were going to pick it up another night. But, and that's why, again, we were so close that, there was never any blues about money over, cards or anything like that. It was just escapism, I suppose.
And how else? I'm sure when you're out in the field on ops, it's quite difficult to take any relaxation. How would you relax when you got back to camp or when you got back to base?
We used to go to the Edinburgh pub, which was in our lines there. Of course, you could only have 2 cans a day, but guys used to sneak stuff in. And guys used to have Crown and Anchor and card games, and these guys used to own those games, and they made quite a bit of money out of them actually. And then when they left to go, they'd sell the game to somebody else. But guys used to go and bet on them and do their backsides. And that was, I just remember this pub, it was just, all it was like a pergola with this roof on it, and it was all open on the sides. It had wooden benches in it. And they used to have these big jars of olives on the end of the table. The first time I've ever got into olives, and I've loved them ever since, because there's nothing like eating olives and drinking beer. Yeah. And we had movie nights, sorry. We had the movie nights. Open air movies. Can't remember much about them, no, but we used to go to the movies. If we got the chance there. Everybody take their deck chair, sit out there, watch the movie. Yeah. And of course then there's reading, because when we were back in our tent we used to read. All the girly magazines and stuff that was sent over.
Well, who did you share your tent with?
With that crew, because you'd have your tank right next door, because you had the outer wire, and then you had us as a tank, where our tanks were in our tents, and then you had the inner wire, which was quite thick, and it had a zigzag thing through it, so you couldn't run straight through it. And the showers and all that inside, and then the mess tent and all that in there. Yeah.
And what was your tent like?
Home away from home. It was, everybody had like a bed with a mosquito net on it, and you had, like I had because you inherited these things from the guys there before. We had a central table in the centre. We have all our reading magazines. I had a bookshelf thing with my own personal stuff there. Bit of a mat on the floor. I remember one night waking up, because when in the night you'd have all these things scurrying around. The local animal population used to go running through our tent. But I remember waking up one night and I had all these little ants all over me, little minute ants that had come through the mosquito net, and they were all over me. So I jumped straight out of bed and I went out back through the second lot of wire into the showers and showered myself off, got them off me, went back there and they're gone. I'll never forget that. Tiny little things, and they were biting hell out of me. But it moved on in the space of 15 minutes. But yeah, we'd have everything go scurrying through. And when you're on, if you're on watch that night, because everybody used to have to take it in turns, and out side of the wire, they had trip flares, and a trip flare would go, contact. It wasn't. A lot of it was wild pigs, and plenty of wild pigs got shot. Yeah.
Where did you get the girly mags from?
They got sent over by mates, or I don't know where they came from. There was plenty of them, though, I know that.
Well, there is this kind of romantic vision of Vietnam, and a lot of it has come through from films and that of this great rock and roll party that was going on. And I mean, how much of that was real?
Yeah, because we had all the music, obviously. Sleepy was right into country music, so he used to play that all the time on over the intercom, and we used to jack up every now. Christ, we don't want more of that shit. Because he was a Queenslander and they were right into country music. But we used to get, obviously, all the, pop music came over, and we were getting all the stuff in the 60s. All the current stuff was coming over the radio, and everybody had pairs of little beetle glasses, and and when you went on R&R, they brought a lot of stuff back. So, yeah. We were sort of up with it then. Of course, music was a big thing for us to keep us going too. Yeah. Constant music. We had constant music all the time, actually. Whereas I suppose it's different in a tank because you can do that. Because we could play it over the intercom. But yeah. But when you got back in the base, it was always music on, I remember. Everybody had tape decks, and they recorded stuff, and
it is the late 60s, early 70s, and pot is starting to get more, I wouldn't necessarily say mainstream, but popular. There is also another view of Vietnam, being entwined with drugs. What did you see of recreational drugs?
Yeah, guy bought a shoebox full of grass for $5. Weed fun smoking all that.
Where from?
I don't know where he got it from. The locals. Shoebox full, $5 US. So we smoked all that. We used to have this area, I just don't know why we were there. It was underground. We used to go down there, smoke a couple of joints.
So you actually had an underground tunnel?
Yeah. No, not a tunnel. It was like a bunker. I just remember that. Vaguely remember that. We used to go down there. Yeah.
And how did you keep being stoned away from officers?
You'd do it discreetly. They can't be with you all the time. Probably they were on it as well, I don't know. But because they're inside the wire and you're outside the wire, you know, a lot of the times you're not left to your own devices because they could come out there any time, but, you know, they weren't over your shoulder all the time, so there's plenty of times you could do it, not a problem.
Was that a popular thing to do amongst?
No, I didn't see a great amount of it. There would, to my knowledge, and there may, obviously people had different instances of drugs, but there was no heavy drugs. Like I know the Yanks were, especially when I went down to Saigon, you know, and I'd spoken to these friends that had come to my sister's places, they were heroin was quite readily available in Saigon if you wanted it. But I never saw it in the Dat, no, certainly not in our section. Might have been later, I don't know, but it wasn't in my time.
That's an interesting point to raise, because I have heard of Vietnam vets coming back with heroin addictions. I mean, how... You never saw it in Nui Dat, but...
Could have been down at Bunga's, but I wasn't into that shit anyway, so I never pursued it, because even where the Peter Bagclay Club was, you could go out through the wire and go into the township, but I never did. Wasn't my scene anyway. I'd rather stay in the Peter Bagclay Club, and I'd try to, you know, especially if we went down there with surf, and I used to always try and get a surf because there were surfboards and all that available. So I'd do that, but that wasn't my scene anyway. So, but I know there were guys that were chasing girls in Bungas. But and the guys in our crew weren't. But you know, we only had that pot that time. But no, or not that I was aware of anyway.
And then you had alcohol when you didn't have that.
Right.
How did you cope with hangovers?
Quite easy. I think when you're young, you know, you're more tolerant of that. Because I remember when I went to Taipei, I was just smashed out of my head for 4 days. And I bought a camera. I remember the first photo developed was at the bar, all the bottles on the bar. And I don't really remember much about it, to be honest. It was just, let's get smashed, and that was the end of it. We were on the grog constantly for 4 days. I didn't want to come home, I know that.
When you say come home, you meant back to base?
No, come home to Australia.
Oh, okay.
You had the option I wanted to go to Hong Kong, but for some reason I couldn't go to Hong Kong, so I went to Taipei. But I knew because I knew that I was coming home in that short period, because I was going to have a short tour. So I knew if I came home to Australia and I saw Elaine, and I wouldn't want to go back. And I thought, no, don't do it. Just go somewhere else, and then we'll get over it. But yeah, so I suppose just to get away from it, you ever tried to blot it all out.
And how easy was it to blot it out?
Easy to get smashed. No, it wasn't real easy. Because you knew you had to go back. But everybody needs escapism every now and again. So even now, we need escapism. People need to get away. So yeah, I was just grateful I was able to get away. Because I think some guys that only had short tours didn't get R&R. But it came up and I grabbed it with both hands. You know, everybody would, just to get away.
What was the surf like in Vung Tau?
Pretty ordinary. Wasn't as good as... No, it was only a beach break. But it was fun. It was something to do, and it was something to get away. And I always remember the Peter Bagclay Club sitting around the pool, you know, this magnificent pool, and just having a few beers and in the sun. Yeah. That was good down there.
And did you mix with American soldiers socially?
No. only sometimes in the fire support bases. I remember, because they were just had everything, and I remember the first time drinking cold tea in one of their fire support bases, and how refreshing it was, because it's stinking hot, and this is icy cold tea. I thought, wow, this is refreshing. And I remember one night we were at stand 2, because every night, it was old British tradition, you'd attack was supposedly come at dusk and daylight. So we're dawn, I should say. We're at stand 2 this night. We're right next to American fire support base, and this big Negro buck sergeant came over, said, "Hey, you guys, do you want some ice cream?" And we're going, "Be quiet, we're at stand 2, we're at stand 2. I don't give an F what you're doing, do you want some ice cream?" And they were just so, blasé about things, I suppose. But yeah, he came over afterwards and we had a pile of ice cream. But they just seemed like if that was the Australian Army, we wouldn't have had ice cream. Right? And I suppose one thing that comes to mind is, I'll never forget this guy as long as I live, is he was a major in the Salvation Army. And he used to come out in this truck by himself, where it's all happening, with this cold cordial in these big stainless steel containers, and packets of chewing gum and things like that. And you think, why would you come and do that? And he was just there. So I will never stop donating to the Salvation Army because of that guy. I'll just never forget that. By himself. Like, he would have been so vulnerable out there. So vulnerable. Anyhow.
And what moral support did that bring?
Great. Just for him to come out and think of us, to get us a cold drink when you're out in the donga, was something just unbelievable. You didn't expect it. And you wouldn't expect it. But he did it. I'll never forget him, short, stout little guy. I think, God, you take some chances. But he did it for us. Did it for us, I'll never forget it.
Did you run into him often? Or?
No, oh yeah, we'd see him a lot out there, yeah. But no, I haven't seen him since, but obviously, but yeah, he would, on a regular basis, would be out there in his trunk with cold cordials for us guys. Amazing. Anyhow.
Well, I mean, that point about him being vulnerable is very true. How would you describe your enemy?
The unknown enemy. You had to admire him. You really had to admire him. And it's pretty hard for me to, well, I suppose it's not, to make comment about them. Because when you look at Vietnam now, in retrospect, what an absolute waste of human life and endeavour that went on for an absolute lost cause. And you've got to admire the Vietnamese for their tenacity to forge on under some just terrible conditions. Sometimes you can, I'm not a socialist or a communist, but you can understand how, if they were downtrodden, that they were fighting for that cause, and you got to admire them for their belief in that cause, and to keep going under those, especially when they were bombing their supply lines with the B-52s, and develop those tunnel systems they had. I really admire them, what they did. I never want to go back there again, though.
But I mean, we've been talking about the Americans and this great firepower that they had, and yet it was a lost war. What do you think gave the Vietnamese that edge, or the VC that edge?
It must have been in the belief in their cause. You know, well, I suppose they had two things going for them that they were able to win the war, was because obviously the terrain and, you know, their guerrilla tactics. And I suppose it's not dissimilar to what's happening in Iraq today, is the guerrilla tactics that are, you know, who knows what's going to happen at the end of the day in Iraq. But my opinion is they're heading right for another Vietnam. And you've got to admire the Vietnamese for, you know, all that firepower that those Yanks had, and they still couldn't beat them. Terrain was a big thing, but obviously the guerrilla tactics of the VC too. But that, you know, to get those people to join the cause, and their dream of having a better society, you've got to admire them for it. I only hope they achieve it at the end of the day, but I think they're a long way off it yet.
And the NVA, did you have much to do with them?
No, not a lot. Only those few contacts that I had, because they were a pretty well organised group. But even the VC, you could probably got to admire them more than the NVA, because they were left to their own resources were very limited for them, and to keep forging ahead, yeah, you've got to admire them.
Did you ever see any of the tunnels that they
No.
built?
No, I've heard about them, no. Yeah, a guy I used to work with used to be a tunnel rat. How he ever survived amazed me. He had a nervous breakdown at the end last time I saw him.
When you're out there in the field, and despite being in a tank, you are still quite vulnerable. What I'm wondering is whether, when you're actually on leave, how... Oh look, I'm having trouble formulating this. But when you first got to Vietnam and you saw the black pajamas and the hats, and you immediately thought VC, when you were out in public or out with the Vietnamese communities, how much did that paranoia play on you?
Yeah, all the time. You know, can I just say something here? It just came into my head, where we had a contact, and only a small contact, and it was gone. And we were coming along this creek line, and said, right, we'll go through this creek line and then we'll head off and we'll camp up there for the night. So we'd gone through and we pulled up, and there was 4 of us in there. First tank had gone through and through a track. So we set the other 3 tanks up, and all the drivers got out, and we broke the track off, got him back on, realigned it, and got the other tank on the other side. Okay, second tank came through and he threw a track as well. Oh, shit. So we broke that one and got that one back on. By that time it was dark, just getting dark. And so I'm over this side of this creek line, and I had to get back to that creek line. And I'm the only driver over there, and these other guys here. It's probably about 300 or 400 metres to get across this creek line. And I'm going through there by myself at night. Now, I really sympathised with the infantry then, because I really had a bad experience with that. And I still, when I walk the dog, there's a creek line that goes behind the back of the Banksia Park High School. Every time I go through that creek line, that reminds me of that. But we had this contact up there, and I don't know if you're aware, VC used to move through the creek lines at night. And I'm thinking I'm imagining voices. It was only probably 10 minutes, even that, moving through that creek line by myself in the pitch black with this Armalite. And I'll never forget that. Nothing happened, but was that I was by myself and imagining something was going to happen.
Peter, we're talking about the enemy and the difficulties you had with enemy and your feelings about that. But how frustrating was it? I guess in many operations you would go out and not see the enemy. So how frustrating would that be?
Probably from my point of view was the noise of the tank and them not seeing anything. I was to an extent glad, I suppose, not being in a conflict. But on the other hand, having said that you're there to do a job and you can't find these guys. And when we'd obviously been in training and we'd heard about tactical warfare, conventional warfare, and I remember seeing film clips of the 7-Day War in Israel, and here we are in this war where you can't find the enemy and you can't see him, and he comes out at night, and that was frustrating, I dare say, from that perspective of it, because you had this imagination of what war's all about. And hang on, you're not playing the right game, you guys. We're supposed to be out there and we see you. So that, to an extent, was, yeah, frustrating. But at the end of the day, to me personally, I suppose I was glad that we didn't see a lot of it. We had a certain number of contacts, but obviously when you're in this slumping big tank and they can hear you coming, you don't have them. The main concern, as I said, was the mines. They were the scariest thing for me, were the mines. And especially towards the end, the RPG-7s. That was, especially when you saw the other tanks coming back in with these holes in them and guys being wounded like they were, and you knew the next time you go out, there's a fair chance they're going to hit you with one, because obviously they knew how they could stop one then. So that was scary.
Well, Vietnam was guerrilla warfare, and you have talked a little bit, but how did you identify the enemy?
In a tank, you're working with the infantry, so they're the ones that were really more so identifying the enemy. And I dare say you identify the enemy when he starts firing at you. I suppose I had a pretty lucky war in respect that we had only limited numbers of contacts. But there's always, obviously, the chance that there's every chance that every time you move outside the wire that you're going to come into a contact, or you're going to get hit, or you're going to something's going to happen. So I dare say this expectation of that something's going to happen is the thing that plays on your mind and your reactions that you have. But as I said, I was pretty lucky to an extent that I had limited actual contacts that we had. But the guys later on, as I said, they were right in the thick of it, especially with these RPG-7s. They really made a difference. That was a whole new change of tactics as far as VC and NBA about how they'd combat tanks. As I said, initially nothing happened because, not nothing happened, but the main way to stop them was mines. Of course, then when they had these anti-tank weapons, it was a whole new ball game then.
Well, can you tell us how it did make a difference? You've explained a little bit, but
well, obviously when you're working with the infantry and you've got tank backup and you've got this firepower, then the enemy's got to have something to combat that. Otherwise, if they haven't got the firepower to combat that, why would they get into an engagement where there's a pretty good chance you're going to come off second best? So, and that sort of, to an extent, gives you and the other guys a bit of confidence when you're going out there. You've got this big bit of equipment moving around with you. As I said, the mines were the main concerns. But then, when these RPG-7s came into play, then you know, shit, there's every chance we're going to get into a real firefight here because they can knock us out. You know, you've got, you know, as I said, we discussed before, the Americans had all this firepower, and of course the Australians had a certain amount of firepower with the equipment we had there, and then all of a sudden they'd come up something to combat you. So that was unnerving.
And did you actually see, I mean, any enemy dead yourself?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
I remember the first time, I didn't see them first time, was we ran over some shallow graves, and obviously the stench as the tracks went over these shallow graves, and I immediately vomited. It was just unbelievable. So that was the first thing I got, because the Vietnamese were very much of dragging away the wounded and the dead, just so they weren't, you know, didn't want to confirm kills or whatever. And obviously buried them in these shallow graves. And of course then you'd come with, and the infantry would call you in after they'd had a contact. But when you get into the contact, a lot of the times they would pull back as soon as a tank would come forward. So there'd be, you know, dead there. So yeah, I wasn't in those things like the guys in the infantry were, where they were up against it with, you know, in those firefights like they were. So yeah, you just see the remnants of what happened. Pardon me.
And did you ever get out of your tank and take a look, or?
Yeah, but wasn't. I suppose the first time you do it, you know, you've seen dead bodies, and I've seen dead bodies since then. It's not something that I want to look at even now. You know, there's I suppose it's a bit like watching football. Some people like to go to the football to see someone get clobbed and a bit of blood and guts spilt. No, that's not my scene. So I suppose you've seen one dead body, and at the end of the day, I don't know where you're going. Not if I don't have to. I wouldn't get out to do it again. No. No.
I guess not that you are all that keen to see a dead body, but it is from your position, as you say, you're not necessarily seeing the results of your contact or your actions. So I wondered if sometimes you were struck with a need to just get that tangible evidence.
No, I'd seen the tangible evidence, and I didn't really want to see it all the time. No. No.
And do you think that, I mean, you mentioned that you threw up when you went over those shallow graves. Do you think there was any shame for you about doing that with your other crew members?
I suppose to an extent, yeah. Something that happened, you can't take it back. You can't, you know, you wouldn't intentionally want to go and do it. But it was done, and can we move on from there?
Sure. Sure. Take a sip of tea. One of the other things that I guess one of your tactics that was used in Vietnam was a term, shredding the jungle. What was that?
In the rounds that we had in the tank was you had 3 different rounds. You had an AP armour piercing round, then you had a HE high explosive round, and then you had a canister round, which basically when it was fired, the canister came out of the barrel about 10 foot out the barrel, and it would break up, and it was like a shotgun blast with little small bits of like reinforcing rod. So we used to use that a lot, and you just fire those in the jungle and just shred the whole thing, and you just wipe out everything that was there. No, we had a contact, and there was these 2 guys ran through the jungle. We just fired that. No, what happened to them? They just disappeared. Shredded.
And were you standing up driving then, or were you lid down?
I had my pistol out actually, because we could see them, and to make, obviously they realised what they need to get out of there fast, and I didn't make it.
And did you ever fire your pistol?
No, I don't recall firing. Because once that main armament goes off, there's no need for that. This is a little toy.
And Louise was talking to you about ambushes along the Mekong River. I understand you also successfully sunk a sampan at some point.
No, we didn't sink one, but one of our other ambushes had. Yeah, we were there for an ambush on there, but one of the other troops had sunk one. Yeah, come down at night. I only got the story secondhand because I wasn't there for that one. But yeah, they of course obviously they used to. And you've got to admire them again for it, you know, bringing arms down there and knowing that there were ambushes along there because it had happened before. Tenacious, they were.
Well, earlier you were telling me that you unfortunately broke a couple of toes. And had to get medevac back to base. I can't imagine what it must have been feeling like to watch somebody rip your toenails off. Were you given any anaesthetic at all?
No. It bloody will hurt, that's all I can tell you.
Well, I'm very surprised that there was a need to even rip your toenails off.
Well, it was just hanging there, so he just... it was partly hanging there where it crushed it, and then he just like got a pair of paws and just pulled it out. I suppose another time too, when I was, because I was medevaced off a second time, Sleepy's mum had sent over these boiled sweets, and I'd broke a tooth with it. It wasn't too bad, so I sort of hung on. When we got back to the DAT, I went to the dentist, and he was an American dentist. No anaesthetic or anything. And then he dropped the drill on my tongue, and he cut all my tongue, and it was just blood pouring out. I couldn't stop it. So I didn't have a lot of faith in medical people in the DAT.
And you then quickly mentioned that you were had a duty of refuelling. You were reassigned or allocated to the tank refuelling chopper unit for a while. How dangerous was that work?
You'd really need to speak to the chopper pilots, but of course that's why they fly at treetop level. But they used to get shot at all the time, and of course you're constantly thinking you're going to get hit again, even though we didn't get hit, and especially when you think you got 2 44-gallon drums of fuel underneath you, that goes up and you might as well say kiss it goodbye.
Well,
So-
I am trying to get a picture of you did explain it, but I'm just wondering if you could take us through again a bit more slowly exactly what the routine of slinging these tanks underneath the chopper was. What?
You had like a cargo net, okay? So you've got this cargo net, you're laying flat on the ground. You get 2 44 gallons of fuel, petrol, roll them into the thing, hook them up, and then you've got a hook on the top of it, and they've got a hook underneath the chopper, and you just, as he drops it down, you click it in, and then you give the thumbs up. He would come down, I would jump, he'd just hover, and I'd climb up on the bar and climb into the chopper, and he'd say, right, and off we'd go. And it always amazed me how the suction keeps you in the chopper, because when you're flying, and he's flying along it, and he's got to be conscious he's got this stuff hanging along the ground, and you come to a corner of the rubber plantation, so he just does a 45-degree turn like that, and of course they swing out at the same time, and you think you're going to fall out, but you don't, because the suction keeps you in there. So that's a bit daunting, because I'm hanging on to everything the first time I do it, of course. But that's that constant thing of thinking, you only have to have one VC, and if he can hit it and cause a spark in that fuel, good night, Dick. So I suppose those guys live with that constant fear all the time, as every chopper pilot did, I suppose, in Vietnam. And as we all know, thank God for the Hueys, because although when I first came home was probably the big thing with hearing the choppers. I remember I was working in the Barsmith library there and was doing the underfloor plumbing, and they actually were using one of those whackers to compact the trench. And I think, chopper. And then I realised what it was. Well, the same was when, even now, when I hear that Channel 7 or Channel 10 chopper go over, yeah, you get a sort of hairs going up from the back of your neck.
It is a very iconic sound and symbol, I guess, of the Vietnam War. Those choppers that you were using for the refuelling.
Iroquois.
Sorry, they were Hercules, were they? Or
No, Iroquois.
Iroquois.
Yeah, well, Hueys they used to call them.
Why did they get the name of Huey?
I don't know. I really don't know. But anyhow, they did. So yeah, anyhow.
And were you tempted ever to stand on the payload, on the drums?
No way. No, I was never that brave. No.
Not necessarily out of being brave, but out of boy's own adventure, I guess.
No.
And how far? I mean, that's a very heavy weight to be carrying for the chopper. How far would it normally have to go before it get to the drop-off point? Or
sometimes we'd obviously go quite a distance. I'm just trying to think. You might go. I'm only guessing now, 20, 30 mile, 40 mile, maybe even further, to come back and resupply again.
That's quite a trip.
Yeah. Especially flying at that treetop level, because you've got all your faith in these guys, these pilots, who's got to obviously first of all manoeuvre through the vegetation that he's bringing it through, but also you're hoping when you come down in the scrub there that he's got it right when he drops you in that drop zone. And of course, you're feeling pretty vulnerable when you're sitting there with your pump, fueling the tanks with them, and then waiting for him to come back and get you, because you're not sitting inside your tank, you're standing out there with your green shirt.
And was that a one-person job, or?
Yeah, I'd do it by myself. Obviously, when you got to where the tanks are, the guys would be helping you roll the drums over there. But I was the only one. I'd be hooking one, and yeah.
And did you have your trusty pistol on you then?
Yeah. That wouldn't have been much good for anything if you'd really got into a firefight. But obviously on the choppers they've got, they had M60s on there. So, yeah. But it was still, well, let's put it this way, an experience. Certainly wouldn't want to do it again.
So then the chopper would come back and get you.
Mm-hmm.
How did you arrange that? Did you?
Obviously they called up on the tank and say he's ready. But they'd be in radio contact the whole time. I never want to get on another chopper again. We went up to just recently, a friend of my brother-in-law's, he's bought some choppers, and they had a day when I was up there and people were going for rides on the chopper. No way. I don't want to get on that thing.
What does it symbolise for you?
Vietnam, every time I hear that thing, it just brings back that memory again. When you hear those rotors going.
Well, you have talked a bit about how your coping mechanisms. I'm wondering, you mentioned, we've talked about the music and the dope, but also just the regular cigarettes. Were you given a cigarette, or were the cigarettes readily available? Or?
Yeah, well, in the American rations, you got cartons of them. I used to smoke those Winstons. I probably used to have 2 packets going at a time, because you're constantly smoking all the time. Constantly smoking. Well, I felt I was. Yeah, you just had, when you're out there and you just needed, I suppose, because I don't smoke now. I gave up smoking when I came home, but it was just something to steady your nerves, and so you constantly had one. What I felt like I was constantly had one in my mouth.
And did you have a Zippo lighter?
Yeah, I did. I've still got it. It's got my Armoured Corps badge on it. My son wants it, but he's not getting it. Yeah. I think everybody that went to Vietnam had a Zippo lighter and a Seiko date day watch and an open spool tape deck. If you didn't have that, you didn't go to Vietnam, I don't think. And and a single reflex camera, yeah.
So there's 4 things there.
Yeah.
A lighter,
yeah.
A tape deck, a camera.
And a Seiko date day watch.
Well, let's talk about the Zippo lighter first. Why was the Zippo lighter such a thing to have?
Well, I don't know. I suppose you felt, because guys could flick them open and flick it in one hit, and I don't know, people used to like to do tricks, but Zippo lighters were in, you had to have one. Everybody had one. I don't know well, obviously the guys that didn't smoke, but I don't think there were too many that didn't smoke.
Well, it's amazing that you've still got the one that you had and that you didn't lose it.
I didn't throw it. I don't know why, because I threw a lot of other stuff, but I didn't.
Did you have a special place for it?
It's in my drawer in there. So is my Seiko date day watch.
But when you went out on ops, where would you stash it?
Oh, in the pocket with my bags. Yeah.
And the Seiko
date day watch.
What does that mean?
It had the date and the day on your watch. Like you just have the date on here now. And I don't know even why I bother having a watch, because I can't read it without my glasses. But everybody had one.
Any particular reason?
Don't know. Everybody said, oh, damn, I've got my Seiko watch. They buy it in the PX or something. And of course he's got one, I better get one. Except some guys that have a Boulevard or something, but most guys had a Seiko watch. I just remember it.
So these things, they weren't Army issue?
No, you bought them at the PX.
And did your Seiko date day watch come in handy?
Not really. It was just a thing that you had to have. It was, you had to have one. Same, and I suppose another thing was, not everybody had them, but we had those little beetle glasses, you know, that John Lennon used to wear. They were absolutely useless, but it was rubbish things.
And the tape deck that you mentioned, the have to have tape deck.
Yeah.
What was that?
I don't even know where it is. It probably didn't last very long. I'm just trying to think what brand mine was. But everybody had one because we used to tape all the records. And you used to buy these records, and they're all different colours. They were just cheap imitation. Obviously they were copied stuff. But the Chinese obviously did them, and they were, instead of traditional black vinyl, they were orange and red and green and all different colours. I remember I had the Beatles' White Album on it and put that on the tape deck. Yeah. Again, everybody had one. Yeah, you better get one.
And where did you get it?
The PX.
It's an amazing store, this PX store. And the camera? What sort of camera was it?
Minolta. And I bought it in Taipei. And the first photo was the bottles on the bar. But again, everybody had one. And of course everything we had developed was developed in slide form, not in. And unfortunately I've thrown a lot of them away. And I dare say a lot of those photos that are in the book, like Vietnam, were all slides that were just converted. Everybody had slides.
Well, it's an interesting picture that those things put together, an image of the Aussie. I guess, did you identify as a trooper or?
Yeah, I was a trooper. Sounds a bit better than private, doesn't it?
And what about Turret Head? Was that a?
That was us tankies. But we're all private or equivalent were troopers in Armoured Corps, whether you're in tanks or whether you're in the cavalry units, which was the APCs.
So you've got your Zippo, your camera, your tape deck, your sunglasses. You've got the complete outfit. Did you ever share your Zippo, or was there ever kind of, I guess?
Oh yeah, of course. Everybody smoked, and if someone didn't have theirs, you just throw it to them, and then back here, and in your pocket again. And that was a big thing, I suppose, that we all used to share things too. It was, if that was one good thing I can always remember about Vietnam, was the comradeship you had with those mates. And if I can move forward into the future now, was now I go to this heart health program, and all the guys that are there are Vietnam veterans, and that same camaraderie comes back with those guys. I feel comfortable with them because we all know what we did, and we've become very good friends through that. And I feel it's probably the best I've ever felt, was to feel that when I have that camaraderie.
Well, it is an interesting point to talk about, because many soldiers say the same thing, that when you go into a war zone, you have a particular language that you speak with each other, and you have particular duties that only you understand. And do you think that that's what got you through your tour?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. If you were left there on your own to survive without the support of those guys, it's just like from word go when we went into rookie training, and everybody's in the same boat and everybody's trying to do things, and you're only going to survive if you support each other. and it's as simple as that, you know.
But what about the flip side of that, I guess? When you're out in stressful situations, you can, and you're getting worn out, you're getting tired, sometimes you can lose your cool, get a bit narky with each other. You're in a tank crew of 4.
Yeah.
Were there times when your crew ever kind of lost their cool or got upset with each other?
Oh yeah, there was obviously, but I don't really recall them, if I can put it that way. I don't really remember those times. There obviously was times when we spat the dummy, when someone had the shits on about something or something happened. You can never say that didn't happen, but you only remember the good times, and that's all I remember. I don't remember having a dummy spat, but I obviously did. And as I said about Sleepy, he was an excellent crew commander, and he kept us in line, you know, and I'll always admire him for that. You know, I don't remember the actual incidents, but I just remember he was the leader, and we would have done anything that he told us to do. He was a pro. Mm.
And what about your sense of humour and jokes? And
Oh, everybody always had to have a joke, and I can't remember them, but even now today, like at the Heart Health program, always someone's got a joke about something, and we all laugh at it. It might be the stupidest, weakest joke out, but all because someone's lightened the air with something. I think, I'm only guessing now, I don't know, but you know, in every conflict there's got to have been that camaraderie between your mates. There has to have been. You wouldn't have survived otherwise. And all had our little stories to tell. And even, you know, a guy that'd get a Dear John letter, you know, you'd support him, and that would be that was the biggest thing for me. It was the biggest thing for all the guys to get letters from home. You know, like you look forward to them, and of course, Elon used to spray hers with perfume like all the other guys, and you'd get your letter, and of course, when they handed it, they'd smell it first before they threw it to you, and there'd be some comment made about that, which I'm not going to repeat here. But when someone got a Dear John, geez, you felt for them, because you knew how important it was for you to get your mail, and if they weren't going to get their mail anymore, Jesus, that would have been tough. It really, if Elon had decided that no, that wasn't going to be it, shit, I don't know how I would have coped with that. You would have coped, but it would have been so much harder. Would have been to know that you had that support and those letters coming every day, and yeah.
And I've heard stories from World War II where letters were heavily censored. What was the case in Vietnam?
Yeah, we were only allowed to write certain things, and we did, and they obviously censored them, but they told us not that. I'm just going back on memory now, that you weren't allowed to talk about operational issues, and you didn't want to do that anyway. I didn't want to tell her about things that made her worry. That wasn't going to achieve anything, so we're very conscious of that. And Elaine still got those letters. I'd hate to even read them, the crap that must be in them. I haven't been going to read them since, I honestly haven't. Oh, it must be terrible. But anyhow, you just wrote something. What the countryside was like, or, you know, what the boys were doing, or whatever.
And towards the end of your tour, well, how did you know your tour was coming to an end?
We were counting down. We had our calendar. 50 days to go, 40 days to go. And as soon as that came down to that last leg, of course you're really packing it then in the end. In that last couple of weeks, don't let it happen to me. Because how many times did you hear it, that guys had a couple of days to go and then wore it? And to me, it was always, you know, when we're out in ops and you're thinking, don't let the RPG get me today. Not today. So you're probably a bit on edge, more so than what you were previously, you know, when it wasn't so close. And that was probably the worst thing we did, was having the counting down the days. But, yeah. Still see it on the calendar on the wall, crossing the days off.
Peter, we were mentioning some hearts and minds work that you did in Vietnam. What was it that you were doing?
Well, I don't actually recall it being hearts and minds, but I just remember that we were very conscious of making sure that we were keeping the local population on side. So, you know, especially in some of the villages, the outlying villages in Nui Dat, we would go there and just show support and make sure that, you know, and I dare say the infantry were much more heavily involved in making sure there were no VC there and they were being intimidated. And of course we'd take the tanks down there and have a show of strength to support these villages. And I think on this particular day we were in the back streets of Berea, which was one of the main towns. Anyhow, I was the second tank in the group as we're going down, and there's all like, not shanty town, but little shops with verandas on them, and you know, and probably where they used to market them. So we're going down this street there, and we get a contact call. So, okay, we've got to go. So there's a little gap in between these. So the first tank goes round there, and of course then I just follow. But Ralphie's got the gun hanging out the side, hasn't he? And he forgot to turn it. And as I pulled the stick, I took the whole row of shops out with the gun. And all we can hear is all these things crashing. And Sleepy said, "We're in deep shit here, boys. We're in deep shit. Keep going." Well, with that, we came over the crest of this hill, and this guy has got his motor scooter, hasn't he? And he's walking across the road with it. And when he sees these 55-tonne tanks come towards him, he drops the motor scooter. So after 4 55-tonne tanks have driven over this motor scooter, there's not much left of it. So as a PR exercise, we had to go back and compensate these people. So we actually were told to go back with the tanks and pay these guys. And I can just remember seeing this motorbike in the road, and the crankcase is just absolutely crushed and embedded in the road with all this oil that's built around it. And these shops, it was funny at the time, but in the end we had to do the right thing. So that was the one incident that I remember. I know it was a bit funny at the time, but tragic really, the population. So yeah, the hierarchy obviously were very conscious that we need to go back and do the right thing and compensate these people for what we'd done. Though it wasn't intentional, it was just, obviously we've got a contact we're going, and when you go, you go. So that's my story. Hearts and Minds, it really wasn't.
Well, I thought that's an interesting point, a show of strength. Who are you?
Well, it was mainly to the local villages that, you know, that VC used to come in and obviously intimidate these people and supply them with food and whatever. And to show that strength that we were there to support them, and if they were supporting VC, I dare say there were 2 points to it. There we were, we could be called upon to help them out. Or if they were supporting them, hang on, if I get caught supporting VC, these guys could come back and sort us out big time. That was I never heard that officially from the hierarchy. I just assumed that's how it went. Mm.
And how were you treated by locals in the various areas that you travelled through?
To be honest, sitting in a tank, you really don't observe that. You know, there weren't any flags waving or anything like that. But I just remember the villagers used to come out and sell stuff to the guys. Like I remember one day we were pulled up on the side of the road and they were selling ice creams, and it looked like a bit of frozen slime on a stick, and guys were buying them. There's no way I was ever going to eat one of those things, but guys did, and I suppose they're still alive. But yeah, there was never any flag waving or anything like that. So you really didn't know who was who, and that was always very difficult. Mm.
Well, Before, we were talking about the last, coming to the end of your tour, and that anticipation of counting down the days. What were you doing in the last few weeks of your tour?
I think we were still on ops. I know we came in on that that last week and we were still in the DAT. I know on that last night that our squadron sergeant major, I can't even remember his name, we just knew him as Mumbles, had invited us into the sergeant's mess as a farewell for us because we were going home, and that was great. I'll never forget that. I thought that was like the squadron sergeant major when he was in Australia. You know, we all thought he was a right bastard, but when we were in Vietnam, he showed that he was a human being, and to invite us into the sergeant's mess on that last night and wish us all the best, I thought that was just fantastic, you know. So you really knew he wasn't a bastard at heart. He was just doing his job. And the same thing as when we left, the CO, Major Smith, invited us in, and there was one guy that he hadn't done his 6 months. If you serve 6 months in Vietnam, you got your 2 medals. Since then we've got other medals, service medals, but there was this one guy that hadn't done his 6 months, and CEO asked him if he wanted to sign on so he'd get his 2nd medal. And, I can't repeat his response. The same with the other guys, and asked us, you know, did we want to sign on? You've got to be kidding, we're out of here, we're going home. So, you know, that was, I just remembered, I thought it was a bit strange that he would ask us that. So yeah, and I just remember the day we left, because we left from Nui Dat airport, and there was I think it was a DC-9, and it was this biggest heap of junk ever, this aeroplane, hardly had any windows in it. And when we arrived there, on one side was the co-pilot and the other side was the flight engineer, and they're both aiming fire extinguishers at the motors as the pilot starts it up, just in case it catches on fire. So that didn't instill a lot of confidence. So you got inside, there were no seats in it, there were just straps across the fuselage. So you put your bag down, because with those big green bags with their gear in it, and you sat on this bag and you hung onto the strap as we took off. And as I said, there weren't a lot of windows, and you thought, oh my gosh, let's hope we don't get shot down the last day going up to Ton Son Nhut. But anyhow, we made it up to Ton Son Nhut airport, and which is Saigon airport, now Ho Chi Minh City. And we got up there and we were on the big Qantas jet. They'd obviously contracted them to fly us home. Photographs all around. Finally down to our last minute, we got on the plane, and I remember sitting in the seat, and they handed us a can of beer, and we took off, and that was the greatest relief I've probably ever experienced in my life. It was like, it just all drained out of you, and you drank this beer. And I remember looking down through the window, and I've still got a photograph of it. You could just see through the cloud the shoreline of Vietnam. I'm never going back there. And we drank the plane dry, and we got into Mascot. We were absolutely, I don't even remember getting through customs. You know, there were tape decks and all our gear, and we went up to King's Cross that night, absolutely smashed. Not that we weren't smashed before we got off the plane. And then the next day we caught the flight into Adelaide.
Can I, before we talk about landing in Adelaide, because that was quite significant, you left, you were still in uniform when you left Vietnam, and
yeah, we were in dress uniform, not in combat fatigues or anything. We were in dress uniform.
How were you preparing yourself for coming home to the protesting?
I don't think to be honest, at that stage I'd thought too much about it. You know, we were there doing a job, and although you knew it in the back of your mind that there was protest movement, but I didn't really think of the ramifications of that when you got into Australia. I hadn't, it hadn't really sunk in, I don't think, that it was such a strong movement as to what it was. And I can understand where it came from too, now when you look back at it in retrospect.
Well, can you describe for me what happened when you arrived at Adelaide?
Well, at Adelaide Airport, we got off the plane, and there was a guy from Keswick saying, "Right, you guys, you got to report to Keswick today." I said, "Hey, hang on a minute, I'm not going to Keswick." And I remember there was a bit of heated argument between everybody, saying, "We're not going to Keswick, no, we just got back from Vietnam, we're going home with our families." "Oh, okay, we'll come down tomorrow." And he relented quite easily. And I remember, obviously, all the wives and girlfriends were sort of waiting for us, and we were, Adelaide's still the same, we were at the tarmac. And they were told they weren't allowed to read us that we were going to Keswick. And the next minute, this girl broke ranks, and just everybody just followed it and ran out to the tarmac, and Elaine ran out there and was just hugging me, and it just felt the best thing. And anyhow, we're coming back in the terminal, and my mum and dad were there, and Elaine's mum and dad were there, and her sister and my sister and all that. And we're coming out there, and there was protesters there, and this guy yelling out, "You murdering bastards." And Elaine's dad grabbed me and said, come on, get out of here. And I don't think I'll ever forget that it was him that, said, "Don't worry about those dickheads." And I suppose the main thing, he was very good to me when I came home, because he knew what was going on, and the friendship he offered me and sort of took me not under his wing, but he was just so supportive of me when I came home. And I used to go fishing with him virtually every second weekend, and I don't think I'll ever forget that. And of course the protest movement was quite large then in Adelaide, and it seemed to be, to me, an ongoing thing, moving every day, and I don't know, just seemed to be gathering momentum. So you didn't really sort of let people know that you came home from Vietnam. You tended not to, for want of a better word, you crawled back into the woodwork again. You just quite, and of course some people, when they found out you went to Vietnam, because when I went for a job and that, they wanted to ask you, but you really I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. So you just, yeah. And they soon got the message you didn't want to know. You didn't want to pursue it any further.
Well, you talked about settling back in when there's a lot of commotion and objection going on around you for what you'd just been through. But the army had also been a part of your life for 2 years. How did you settle back into civilian life out of army routine?
It was probably pretty difficult for Elaine those early years. I honestly don't know how she coped, but and I was probably a bit of a bastard then, because once you went to Keswick and you got discharged, that was the end of it. You're on your own now, except for that training I gave you, because there was no debriefing or anything like that. You're on your own. And so I suppose my surfing thing was a good escapism for me. I down the coast on a constant basis. Had my Mini Cooper. We had the Mini Cooper first, and then when we went to the World Surf Titles for our honeymoon, it gave up the ghost on the way home, so we bought a brand new Beetle in 1970, I'll never forget it. Best car we ever had. And surf racks on it and down the coast. Take my board to work, and I'd be late home at night. So that was probably difficult for Elaine, you know, for her, and we've talked about this since, when she moved out of home, you know, in this solid family unit, and married to this bastard who can't find himself, and taking off surfing and probably drinking too heavily. Yeah, we got through it.
Well, what did you talk about with Elaine about Vietnam?
You'd have to ask her that, but not a lot. She, when I first went and saw, this is in the last few years, I went and saw Marty Ewer, the psychiatrist, who couldn't coping with work, is she came and she said, I never knew a lot of those things that you talked to him about. She said, I learnt so much just in that couple of hours with Marty. So yeah, it was just swept under the carpet, I suppose, and I just tried to get on with it. I was having a few problems, obviously, with nightmares and stuff when I first came home. And I thought, oh well, you know, I'll get over it, get on the booze a bit more. But my surfing was my good escapism.
Well, I was going to ask you if you had any nightmares. Do you mind if I ask what the nightmares were?
I was back there. You know how I said to you, Sleepy did 2 tours? I'd always constantly dream I'm doing a second tour. And I'd wake up in a hot sweat. Why would I want to do a second tour for? And then, of course, it was just things that happened over there. And then I'd wake up and I'd be covered in perspiration and get out of bed and walk around for a while. Yeah.
You also mentioned that the choppers give you the feeling of being back at Vietnam.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that would pop up and you'd get a flashback?
I remember we went to the first Royal Adelaide show after I came home. I'll never forget it. We were in you know, the kids' nurseries with the little lambs and all that. And we're with friends of ours, actually. It was the best man at my wedding, John Mason. And the fireworks must have gone off. Bang, I'm on the deck, thinking contact. Everybody's looking at me. I just felt such an idiot, but anyhow, it's just a... they took me outside and, you know, of course, yeah, we understand. But they probably didn't. But, yeah, in anything with a sudden bang or something, you know, you react to it. And the other thing was, I suppose, was, and I tried to divorce myself from it, was the protest movements, you know. And of course, I got quite narky, I suppose, because they were university students, and I'd think, here's the future brains trust of Australia, and they don't understand what happened. And I used to get a bit of the shits on about that, but then probably I didn't understand their point of view. And it's only when you look back at in retrospect and you look at the big picture and think, what a bloody waste. What an absolute bloody waste. Mick lost his life for what? Fuck all.
Another thing that you mentioned earlier on was the claustrophobia. When did you first realise that you had a problem with confined spaces?
I suppose when I was plumbing, one of the first places and I was again very lucky, I had a great teacher, a guy called Brian Johnson, who was my boss, and he knew I was going through these. He was a really understanding guy, and it was very difficult for me because there I was as an adult, expect to be a tradesman, because everybody expects you to be a tradesman, but I don't know shit from clay, so to speak. And I'm trying to learn it, and Brian was bloody terrific to help me through it. But anyhow, we're in the service duct in the Adelaide University, and we had all the services coming from the service duct underneath it, in it like a big concrete tunnel. And the more I went down there, the worse it got. And Jono, to his credit, said, "Oh no, come out, mate. You don't need to go there anymore." And he put me on somewhere else. So I knew then that I didn't like being in tunnels, and we were in the dark too. And yeah, it was a bit unnerving for a while. But again, Brian was terrific, really, when I explained it to him. But I was lucky to have a boss like that. Because probably if it hadn't been for Jono, maybe I would have tossed it in and said, "Oh no, well, this is not for me." But yeah, no, worked through it.
We've also heard Vietnam vets talk about post-traumatic stress that may come on 20, 25 years later. Have you ever experienced the post-traumatic stress?
I've been diagnosed with chronic post-traumatic stress. And that only happened, probably was a gradual thing that started coming in. And I suppose it started, again, I started experiencing nightmares. What the hell am I getting these for again? And I was trying to hide it and trying to put it out of my mind. Why am I going back to this again? Why am I thinking about these things again? You know, to be stimulated by the chopper or something happened, or when I thought, geez, I thought I got through this. And I started having problems at work. I wasn't coping. And one time I was in my office and I'm bawling my eyes out. Oh, Christ, a lot was happening to me. And that's when I met Malcolm, and Malcolm started explaining things to me. And this is a mate of mine. He said, "You better go and see somebody." And that's when I first saw Ron Coxon, and he said, "You better go and see Marty Ewan." And he got going. And I was seeing Marty for about 2 years before I gave up work. But the big one for me was Deborah.
Do you want to just pause for a moment? Now, Peter, we were just talking about the post-traumatic stress, which came in considerably quite a few years later. In that time, you did not want to mention Vietnam, but at what stage did you actually want to start talking about it?
I think it's when I spoke to Deborah Richards, who's a psychologist, and once Deborah got me talking and started explaining to me why I was getting these things and through the graph, and I just can't thank that woman enough for explaining it to me and talking me through it. And we had quite a few, obviously, sessions. And I thought, oh, well, terrific, I'm right now. I can get on with work and can cope with this. So I kept working, and then it felt like it was just collapsing down on me in the end. I thought, Deborah's got me right, but then work was just getting too much. And as I said, I was in my office crying, and I spoke to my boss about it. I said, look, I'm having problems, I'm just not getting through it. But fortunately, in my role, which was the state sales manager for Venedex, I'd done this job for 15 years. I'd built up the clientele. I could have time off work, and I was having plenty of time off work. If I just couldn't cope, he said, just go. And the sales figures still just kept rolling on. So they weren't really upset that I was taking all this time off, because the business was still generating. But then it was, I don't want to go and see these people anymore. I don't want to go and talk to anybody anymore. And you can't not talk to everybody, and you've got a mobile phone, and the bloody thing kept ringing and people wanted you to do things and all that. And so I used to switch it off. But then I'd switch it off and I'd have 20 or 30 messages, and that's when at the end of the day I just said to him, look, Jim, I just can't do it anymore, mate. I just can't. You can't run this business, because we were running a $20 million business, and you can't, and it started to slip a bit, and I said, look mate, I can't do it. And they, to their credit, they are absolutely fantastic to me, and I just can't thank Jim, my old boss, enough for getting me through that. But in the end I just couldn't do it. Elaine started to really panic there because I just didn't want to go to work anymore. And the day I walked out of that office, it was just like a huge relief. But the only problem I've got with it, I thought I could still cope with it. When I finished work, I thought, oh, yeah, I'll be okay. I'll take 6 months off. Because Elaine said to me first, just take 3 months long service leave. And I said to her, I've got this awful feeling I'm going to have this 3 months off and I'm not going to want to go back. So I said, look, let's finish it here, and if I feel right after 6 months, I can go and get a job somewhere else. I know I'll find it difficult. I'm 57 years of age, but you know, that's the worst case scenario. So it was 6 months off, and that's when I started the Heart Health program, and I thought, oh, and this was just terrific, me talking to these guys. And I had all these plans of all these projects I want to do, and I was still finding it very, very difficult to even get started on the project. But thankfully, again, Deborah's come to my age. She said, just break it down to little bits, just start doing little bits. But even now, here I am, a plumber by trade. I think I've got a certain amount of intellect, and I've got to put a sprinkler system in here. I've got all the stuff out in that shed, I've got all the pipe, I've got all the fittings, but I can't do it. I can't bring myself to do it. I don't know why, and I've just got to keep plugging away and chipping away at it, but I'm finding it difficult. And Elaine's talking about putting an extension on the pergola. I said, Elaine, I don't think I can do it. I built that pergola, I built a whole pergola, I didn't have a problem with it, I could usually turn myself to anything, but I can't see myself ever doing it. I just can't get motivated again.
Well, the Heart Health program sounds like it's been quite significant in helping you get through this. You've met up with other Vietnam vets since then as well, and you've spoken about the camaraderie. There's this belief that no one really knows what Vietnam is like unless they've gone there. What's it like with the Vietnam vets?
I know we speak about how we have this thing that comes back to us, and the guy says, I get that too. So you think, I'm not the only dickhead that's got this, because I'm trying to think, what's happening to you, Peter? Why is this happening to you? It must be only me. And I'm not talking to anybody to start with, I'm trying to hold it all in there. But then when you talk to them and they say, yeah, I've got that too, then you think, oh shit, it's not only me. So that's been a revelation or something to think, oh yeah, that's not only me. But and of course the big thing was, why? Why am I having this now? I've been there, I've put it in the back of my mind, I've got on with life, and here we are 30 years down the track, and it's all coming back again. Why? But thankfully, as I said, Deborah's been terrific and explained that to me, and then that just reinforces it when you speak to these other guys. So that, and I dare say, we don't go into a lot of detail, we don't dwell on the fact of it, we just feel good together for some reason. I don't know, and then I never wanted to march. But I'd go to march, and like probably Anzac Day was a big day for me, because you meet the guys that you went through corps training with, even though there's only one that I served in Vietnam with, but they all went to Vietnam later than me. I feel good with them. So that's probably the only way I can explain it.
Well, what does Anzac Day mean to you?
It probably, because initially when I first came home, I didn't want to be involved with it. I heard all the stories about the RSL in Vietnam, veterans of Vietnam War. It wasn't a real war. You know, you couldn't join, and you know, you don't want to ever be part of that. So you just went back into your shell on an Anzac Day. I never really wanted to know anything about it. But when you start thinking about it, and you're thinking about not what we did, what those guys in the First World War did, and what horrific times they must have had. We had it bloody easy compared to what they had. And especially when you start reading about these guys in France, were in the trenches, had been there for years on end in the mud and the shit, and they couldn't hack it anymore. And so they pulled back, and these officers put them up against the wall and shot them for desertion. I think, holy shit. And you think if they went through that for our country to have the way of life we had now, and the Second World War, we could have been speaking German or Japanese or whatever, it would have been a totally different world. And when you try and keep that whole thing in perspective and think what they did for us, that's what Anzac is about. Vietnam was an absolute disaster. Let's not kid ourselves. It was an absolute total waste. It didn't achieve a bloody thing. It just... But I try and keep it in perspective in as much as I got called up, I went and did it, I went and did a job because the government said so, and I came home. And now when you look back on it, but I can't change that, that's ancient history. It happened. We did it. But what a waste.
Well, how did national service change you?
Probably on some points it was probably one of the things that probably was good for me, in as much as here I was going through life aimlessly, really not knowing what I wanted to do. That's how I feel for young kids today. We were immature to an extent. It made me grow up, and to an extent it gave you those disciplines in life. And I don't know where I'd be having not had national service. I could have been a complete dero, I don't know, but from that aspect it was good for me. I just wish I didn't have the shit in my head, that's all. And there was one thing I was going to say earlier too, was because a lot of guys cling to religion or whatever to cope with that. It's terrific if they do. I'm not a religious person. There was only one time, that's when I was in rookie training. After 10 rounds around the parade ground with full pack in the pouring rain, I thought being a Methodist might be a better idea. But I'm not really religious.
And how did your 6 months in Vietnam change you?
I think it really makes you appreciate life. It really makes you appreciate the lifestyle we have in Australia when you see what other people haven't got. And how lucky we are. We are really so lucky. We're just so lucky. And sometimes I have guilt thought processes about that as well. You feel guilty about that because you see in life sometimes a lot of the haves and the have-nots, and you think, Jesus, don't bitch about it. Look what other people haven't got. And that's why I'm probably not religious, because if there was a God, why does he let this happen? Why does he let people starve and live a horrible life when we've got this life, a fantastic life? And I suppose I've got to say I've had one really good life. You know, apart from the shit in the head. Yeah. I'm going to flash house, but I'm happy to a point. I'm lucky I got up. Again, I got a place, we're lucky my dad left it to me, a legacy that my dad has got, and I'll always remember him for that. We had a place down Corny Point, right on the beach, and that's just the best place I can go to escape.
Well, your story that you've shared with us today is going to go into the archive for future generations to refer to. What advice would you like to leave for those future generations?
War's not going to solve any problems. It really, I suppose I saw something the other day when it was actually a minister that said about war, if there were 3 Christians and they were sitting there and there was a woman being raped, and the first Christian prayed, the second Christian called the police, but the third one got a big stick and went down to deal with it. So I hate to think we're going to have more wars, and I hate to think about what's happening in Iraq, because I've got this awful feeling that it's going to turn into another Vietnam, which is going to just be goddamn awful for those guys over there. But what I've got to say is thank God for those guys that did that in the First World War and the Second World War for us, because we would be a totally different country today if they'd come in here and imposed their lifestyle on us. And I thank them from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, for sharing your story with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.